The Justice League is arguably the most iconic team in fiction, and with James Gunn's DCU hitting the ground running, we have a real opportunity to actually get a fully fleshed out Justice League saga in the DCU. But what exactly should this saga consist of? What storylines from the comics should they pull from? What villain should be in these stories? These are all questions that will be answered in this video, because in this video I'm going to be giving you my ideal DCU Justice League saga. But very quickly before we get into the video, if you do like the content, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. It would be very appreciated. And I also just want to let you guys know now that I'm actually going to be starting up a podcast with my friends over on the Hive Mind YouTube channel, and we'll be aiming to drop 1 to 2 episodes per week starting next week. So if you guys are interested in hearing us yap more about these topics but in a podcast format, please do me a favor and head over to that channel and subscribe so you won't miss an episode. Now that we got the hoopla out of the way, let's start the video off by establishing what we already know about the DCU's Justice League. And this will honestly be very brief because there isn't much that we know at this point, because as we know, the Justice League hasn't actually formed yet in the DCU. So the first thing we'll have to go over is how exactly will they establish themselves in this universe. And that brings me to our first piece of concrete evidence, and that is that at this point in the DCU, some superheroes are corporate funded. And the first major example of this that we see is the Justice Gang, which consists of the likes of Mr. Terrific, Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, and Hawkgirl. Now, why is this actually important? To me, this is important because I think that this team will plant the seeds for what is to come in the future of the Justice League for the DCU. And while that might be a little bit off-putting for some people because of the fact that none of the founding members are actually on this team, I do think that there's a method to the madness when it comes to this plan. And I honestly think that this is the direction that James Gunn is going to go in for this part specifically. Now, to understand what I'm getting at, we must first establish that the Justice Gang are owned by Maxwell Lord. This is important because in the comics, Maxwell Lord actually owned/led a subset of the Justice League called Justice League International, which again was a subset of the Justice League that formed after the original Justice League disbanded. Now, what I think is going to happen in the DCU is actually the reverse of that. I think that the Justice Gang will evolve into the Justice League International, and then by extension of that, the original Justice League that we know and love will form. And this honestly seems very likely because of the fact that James Gunn has teased Justice League International on numerous different occasions. Now, how exactly would this work? Before I actually explain how this works, I just want to clarify that this is pure speculation and none of what I say may actually happen. However, I do think what I'm going to say is likely in some way, shape, or form. That being said, this brings us directly to Man of Tomorrow, which is the quote-unquote sequel to Superman 2025, which is described to showcase Superman and Lex Luthor teaming up against a much bigger threat, and is rumored to actually feature other heroes in the DCU. For example, Supergirl is rumored to have a role in this movie, the Justice Gang is also rumored to be returning, and we also got some teases from Aaron Pierre, who was playing John Stewart Green Lantern in this universe, and also Grant Gustin, who previously played The Flash, but this could just be him showing his support, so take this with a grain of salt. It was also reported that Lobo may also have a role in the film in some way, shape, or form. Long story short, this film is going to be some type of ensemble film, with Superman and Lex Luthor at the forefront, obviously. However, because of this, it begs the question, will characters like Batman appear in this movie? Again, specifically because of the fact that a lot of other heroes are already pretty much confirmed for this movie because of the fact that they're being rumored to be in it by very reputable sources. And with Brainiac potentially being the main threat of this film, it wouldn't be far-fetched to have Batman swing in to actually give Superman a helping hand. With that being said, if we hypothetically assume that Batman and those other heroes are in fact going to appear in Man of Tomorrow, I think that this will set the stage for Maxwell Lord to work behind the scenes like he does in the comics to start to form the Justice League International. And this, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the first project in this saga, which is a Justice League International TV show. And I would like for this project to largely adapt the Justice League International run by J.M. DeMatteis. And like I already said, I would like this series to showcase how Maxwell Lord actually manipulates events behind the scenes to actually get this team to form. And I think that doing this would make perfect sense because we've already seen that the Justice Gang are struggling to recruit new members in Peacemaker Season 2. So we could essentially see things like Maxwell Lord nudging heroes into working together, arranging certain crises that heroes around the world would have to respond to. We could see him interfere with certain communication systems, and we could also see him manipulate certain politicians and international affairs, which would explain why a character like Batman would be willing to lead this team. With that being said, in the comics, the original roster consisted of Batman as the leader, Martian Manhunter, Guy Gardner, Black Canary, Blue Beetle, Mr. Miracle, Dr. Fate, and Shazam. We later got other additions to the team like Captain Atom, Metamorpho, Fire and Ice, Booster Gold, Rocket Red, and Animal Man. And again, this was all due to the manipulation of Maxwell Lord. Now, because this show is going to be set in the DCU continuity, I'm not expecting it to copy exactly what happens in the comic beat for beat. So with that being said, I would just want for this series to showcase how much governments and corporations actually influence the heroes of the DCU. And that would honestly just be continuing the trend of what we see so far in the DCU. So much so that certain members of the Justice League International, like Batman, will choose to leave because of the fact that he doesn't want to be government or corporate owned. And he would feel as if Maxwell Lord is manipulating the team, which is kind of the case. And this would by extension cause other members to want to leave as well. And this would bring us directly into our first Justice League movie, which would be Justice League: The New Frontier. Now, the reason why I'm choosing The New Frontier as a storyline to be adapted for the first Justice League movie is because this story perfectly represents what's the current state of the DCU when it comes to superheroes, government, and corporations. Obviously, in the actual New Frontier comic, there's a lot of other things going on, like racism, because of the fact that the story is set in the 1950s. However, the idea of the government not trusting heroes is still very prominent in that story and is one of the major plot points. And in that story, it's not until the center shows up that the governments of the world realize that they need the heroes, and the heroes also realize that they need the government and that they all should work together. Basically, what I'm saying is that I think that something of a similar fashion will happen in the DCU. As far as whether or not the center would be the main villain of this movie, I'm not sure, because there's a lot of rumors and a lot of theories going around about who the first villain could be for this film. And as far as the center, we haven't really gotten much except for the speculation that it could potentially be one of the threats in Lanterns. But again, even that in itself is speculation and doesn't really have any concrete evidence to support it. But long story short, I would want whoever is going to be the main antagonist of this film to be a big enough threat that forces the government and the heroes of the world to work together. So that could be the center. It could honestly be something like Parallax from the Green Lantern side of things. And honestly, that could tie into Lanterns because of the fact that the center is so afraid of humanity, it decides to eradicate it, and Parallax, being the emotional entity of fear, could just influence the center even more. That would also then explain how Lanterns ties into the overarching story of the first chapter of the DCU. As for the Justice League roster that I would want to see in this movie, I would definitely want this movie to be more of an ensemble Justice League film than just the regular traditional 7. And that's specifically because we already know that this universe is taking inspiration from Justice League Unlimited, and this is also supposed to mark a new age for superheroes in this continuity, hence the name The New Frontier. So if the governments and heroes of the world are making a truce for this specific moment in time, I think that it makes a lot more sense to have a lot more heroes than just the regular 7 Justice League members. That being said, I still would love to see the traditional 7 just with a lot of other heroes fighting alongside them. As far as the Green Lantern issue, I'm not sure of how Jordan will remain after Lantern Season 1, but if he does, I would definitely want him to also appear in this movie, not as the main Lantern because I'm sure John Stewart's going to be the main Lantern, but at least to just help out, like I said, with those other heroes. Moving on to the second Justice League film in this saga, it is Justice League Legion of Doom. And not only is this project something that I've been wanting to see in live action for the Justice League for years, but it also kind of has the seeds planted for it in the DCU so far already. As I've mentioned before in other videos, we basically have the entire Legion of Doom roster already confirmed. We obviously got Lex Luthor and Superman, we got Sinestro and Lantern, Brainiac is confirmed for Man of Tomorrow, Gorilla Grodd also got revealed in Creature Commandos, and he just got confirmed to be the main villain of the upcoming DC crime show that will be led by Jimmy Olsen. We also have Ultraman, who was in Superman 2025, which is just going to be Bizarro. Then we also have Cersei, who could easily fill the role of a Wonder Woman villain on the Legion, and the Joker himself has also already been teased by James Gunn. Now obviously they can add some more villains to this roster to flesh it out a little bit more. These are just the villains that are already confirmed for the DCU or have been heavily teased. Now, as for how the Legion of Doom will form in this universe, I think we should look no further than Salvation, which for those of you who don't know, first appeared in the Peacemaker Season 2 finale and is basically an inhabitable planet that is housing the metahuman villains of the planet Earth. And my theory is that a lot of the villains that we see lose over time in the DCU are just going to be placed here on this planet for their prison sentence. And that brings us to Lex Luthor, who, if you guys have seen Peacemaker Season 2, is now on a redemption arc. And because of this, he now has an allegiance with Rick Flag Sr., which is obviously going to tie into him in Man of Tomorrow and helping Superman fight Brainiac. Now, my theory with Lex Luthor has always been that I think he'll help Superman with Brainiac to get back into the public's good graces. After getting back into good graces with humanity, he'll then use this publicity to run for president. But obviously, in true Lex Luthor fashion, he won't actually be up to any good, which will set the stage for a world's finest adaptation that I think will just be based off of Superman Batman Public Enemies. And and take heavy inspiration from Superman Batman 2003. And I think this movie will bridge the gap between Justice League New Frontier and this Justice League Legion of Doom film. And in this film, Lex Luthor will ultimately lose to Superman and Batman, and then behind Superman and Batman's backs, the government will send Lex Luthor to salvation like they've been doing with a lot of these other villains. And then Lex Luthor, now on salvation using his intelligence, will form the Legion of Doom, and all of them will escape. With that being said, as for the roster of the Justice League in this movie, again, I would want it to be the original 7, maybe minus Hal Jordan, and you could just put John Stewart in his spot. And if Hal Jordan is still alive at this point in time, you could just say he's off-world doing something with the Green Lantern Corps. As far as other members, I would love to see Green Arrow as a consistent member alongside Black Canary. I'd also like to see characters like Plastic Man maybe, and I'd also probably throw in Zatanna at this point. Now this next one is probably my favorite suggestion in this entire video, and that would honestly just be a live action adaptation of Justice League Crisis on Two Earths. And I think that this movie would be perfect in the DCU for so many reasons. Reason number one being that it would be very cool to see our Justice League basically verse mirrors of themselves. And it would also be really cool to see the contrast of Lex Luthor and good Lex Luthor in this universe, especially considering how well they're already fleshing out Lex Luthor of the main DCU universe. And with the Ultraman archetype already existing within the multiverse because of the fact that Lex Luthor created a clone and named him Ultraman, I think that this is the perfect opportunity to bring the actual Ultraman from Earth 3 into live action. So that way we could still get the clone that Lex Luthor created becoming Bizarro like it would happen in the comics, but then again we would also just get the actual Ultraman, and it wouldn't feel like we wasted the character with a clone that would have just ended up becoming Bizarro. But long story short, this movie will go to showcase to the Justice League that if their power isn't checked, they could become this dark, twisted version of themselves. And if I had it my way, this would be the reason why Batman actually creates his iconic contingency plans. And that brings me to the next Justice League movie, in which I'm honestly probably getting very greedy at this point, and they're probably not gonna have this much Justice League movies, but it is what it is. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a live action adaptation of Justice League Tower of Babel. Now, a lot of you guys are probably familiar with Batman's contingency plans because of the movie Justice League Doom, which is just a loose adaptation of the actual comic storyline Tower of Babel. And because they actually utilized the Legion of Doom as the villains in that movie, this movie I would actually want to basically copy the events of the comic, in which Ra's al Ghul is the one who actually steals Batman's contingency plans. And I think with Damian Wayne being introduced in Brave and the Bold, which is going to be the DCU Batman's first live action solo film, it makes perfect sense for the League of Assassins to have a very prominent role in this universe. And I think that the League of Assassins will continue to be a lingering threat even after Brave and the Bold. And with Batman's romance with Talia, it could be a perfect segue into how Ra's al Ghul actually gets his hands on the plans in the first place. So it would essentially be Batman's own weakness that compromises the Justice League. Now, as for the physical threats of this film, obviously you can't have the Justice League just fight their contingency plans for the entire film, so they have to go up against some kind of physical threat, and I think that the perfect villain for this is Amazo. And there's honestly a lot of ways that you could utilize Amazo and Amazo Tech and have it work in synergy with the League of Assassins, as well as Dr. Ivo potentially working with Ra's al Ghul. But for the most part, I would want this movie to mainly focus on questioning the ideology of the Justice League, because at this point they would have all witnessed the evil versions of themselves from Earth 3, and they would all have their own personal reactions to this event. And Batman's reaction to this event would in fact be his contingency plans. And honestly, if they set it up this way, in which he sees evil versions of his teammates, it would honestly make him feel a lot more justified in his actions. Seeing how the Justice League would get past that, in my opinion, would be a great movie. With that being said, I would still want it to follow the comic, and I would still have the Justice League vote Batman off of the team at the end of the movie. And that would set the stage for the next Justice League project, or first Crisis event in this universe, and that would be Final Crisis. Now obviously I know that it doesn't sound right being called Final Crisis when it's the first crisis of this universe, but I'm just basing it off of the comic storyline Final Crisis, and I couldn't think of a different name to give it. But again, this is just another storyline that I would like to see in the DCU, and with DCU Batman already having Damian Wayne and being a veteran, again, I don't think he'll be that much older than Superman. I think he'll probably be in his mid-30s when he's cast, a little bit older than Superman, probably like 2 to 3 years. But I do think that at this point we're already on like what, the 4th or 5th Justice League movie. I think that Batman at this time will likely be in his mid to late 40s, and this, in my opinion, would be the perfect time to have him sacrifice himself against Darkseid, who we already know is confirmed for this universe because he's appearing in the Mr. Miracle animated show, which is confirmed to be DCU by James Gunn. And this would line up with everything that James Gunn said because of the fact that they aren't using Darkseid initially as the big bad, so using him later on down the line in like the 5th Justice League movie makes a lot more sense than him showing up before that. So again, this movie would loosely adapt the events of Final Crisis, and again, because of the scale of this event, it wouldn't just be a regular Justice League movie where there's just 7 members. It would be like a Justice League Unlimited kind of project where we have heroes from every corner of the world helping out. As far as Batman's quote-unquote death in this movie, I don't think that he should actually die, because I personally think that there's so many stories that they could tell with Batman in the DCU. And I honestly think that if they cast an actor to play Batman who's like 35 right now, I think that they could play the character until they're at least 55. Obviously, that's only if they actually wanted to do that as the actor. But with that being said, the only reason why I'm fine with this quote-unquote fake death is because it would help to develop the Bat family dynamics in the DCU, because then we can get iconic storylines like Battle for the Cowl, which would result in Dick Grayson temporarily picking up the mantle of Batman, which could then be explored in like a Nightwing TV show. And then Tim Drake, who would be Red Robin at this point in time, would go on a mad search for Batman, believing that he never actually died in the first place, which I think unironically could also be adapted into a live action show and could actually showcase Batman's journey throughout time while Tim Drake in the present is looking for Batman. And then if they decide to bring Batman back, the actor again would probably only be in like his mid to late 40s and could probably play Batman up until his 50s. If you guys are interested in exactly how I tackle that, stay tuned for my Batman saga that I'm going to do for this channel. But overall, that's pretty much what I would do for a Justice League saga within the DCU. If you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And as always, it's been K the God, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.